in Africa. That was actually very, very interesting to see. And what the pandemic has done to our continent from his numbers is the worst dip we've seen in almost 2 decades. And for Nigeria, we saw a dip of about 3%. There's a total African loss of over 170 billion. And it's also instructive that he mentioned that, which is part of the challenge we have in Nigeria, about 60% of our debt service could indeed be eaten into our budget directly. The bank, from the numbers, had supported Nigeria and African businesses. They are putting together a 3 billion social bond, which is the largest we've seen. But he has also brought forward some of the regular indices that we see. About 60% of our informal, about 60% are in the informal sector of our economy. How do we continue to enlarge the coast and get a lot more people, in the formal sector? And he had mentioned to us digitalization. And along the line, he mentioned the Estonia experience, which is a distributed-based, taxation system. He reminded us as into how we need to ensure that our natural resource work for us, work for the work for the economy, work for our citizens, and how we need to ensure that whilst we continue to say that our tax to GDP ratio is very low, he actually did mention to us that the implicit component of the tax, is actually very high, one of the highest around, where citizens have to, provide some support around water, electricity, and some of the requirements that is needed for them to continue to do business. I think at the end of it all, he had mentioned all the strength and capability that AFDB can bring to bear, how they can support the Nigerian government, how they can support the Federal Inland Revenue Service. He forgot to mention how they can support subnationals like ourselves, but we also need the support. But I think it's important for me personally, an opportunity to sit here, as the biggest subnational in the country, where over 60 to 65% of the VAT collectible in the country are in Lagos, but it also comes with a huge challenge, a huge, enormous challenge. Lagos used to be the seat of the federal government, and so when it moved to Abuja about 25 years ago, all of the challenges are still remaining in Lagos. How do we need to pack the refuse, the schools, the hospital? I've seen a lot of people come up to me today, and they've greeted me as the governor. They are working in Abuja, but their family are still in Lagos. So these are the reality that I found myself. But I know that the panelists here, they are all dual citizens. The GMD of NNPC, is my very good friend. Yes, we keep him here in Abuja, but he stays in Lagos. And the 2 other gentlemen are Lagosians by extension, but they make a lot of money in Abuja. So I will start with my Abro who works with Deloitte. They are tax experts. It's common knowledge that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected many businesses globally and Nigeria, last year. The Nigerian government, through the Ministry of Finance and other agencies, released some palliative to that effect. In your view, do you think the citizens and businesses, do they feel the impact, of how federal government and the state have reflected or have been able to take up their issues, given the very pandemic that all of us are ravaged with last year?
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Governor and the Chair. I think there's no denying the fact that the speed with which the country responded to the pandemic, both at the national level and also the subnational. I think there's no denying the fact that a lot of commendation greeted that. The truth is that the size of the palliatives, particularly in terms of the monitoring and all of the interventions that were rolled out to the citizens, was determined by the size of the fiscal headroom that we have. So if we judge it within the limit of available resources and, compare, what the country did with our contemporaries, across the world, there's no denying the fact that I think the response from the country was quite commendable. And we could see this also in terms of the global statistics that are, roll out around the world, both, in terms of the casualties and how citizens, and how the effect was contained. So I think the country deserves a significant measure of commendation. What I also note is that beyond the monetary palliatives that were rolled out, particularly because, this is a tax dialogue, I think some of the regulatory first steps, if I can use that word, that we took earlier in the year, probably earlier in 2020, not probably even knowing that the pandemic was going to be that severe, was going to hit us, I think it was quite timely. It was the first time in many years that we're going to see the return of the finance bill, and that fiscal instrument as a way of helping businesses and helping the citizens. So many of the measures that were contained in that finance bill that eventually got signed were the kind of measures that people were clamoring for around the world. So how do you empower MSMEs? How do you provide, enabling environment for taxpayers, to be able to run their business more efficiently and just encourage businesses with incentives, even from a regulatory side. So when we're measuring the quantum of the interventions, I think we need to recognize that beyond the financial intervention and the physical palliatives and the materials that were shared, even from a regulatory side, we appear to have some bit of foresight that was just phenomenal. The reliefs we provided for micro businesses, the tax exemption from a VAT, from an income tax perspective, virtually every sectors of the business in the finance, right? Virtually every sector of the economy got something from that bill, and I think that was a great move, and we've seen the return of that with the Finance Act 2020 that has just been signed. So with those two interventions alone on the regulatory space, I think we've done far more than we have done in a decade.